Hey folks, everything new under the sun. I've often said that a nuclear weapon kind of needs to be dropped, at least one of them, to implement World War III, economic collapse, global famine, and really put the world in a situation where they're desperate for a world leader, a savior to come save them from all the things that are happening. But it doesn't have to necessarily be a nuclear weapon. They could drop a weapon of mass economic destruction. This is War News 247. Nuclear strike. On dollar and West, Russia introduces BRICS currency to the United Arab Emirates. It will be based on golden rules and natural resources. So there's an image here of the BRICS coin, supposedly. There you can see the BRICS coin. And, is that what it's going to be? Russia has released the first images of the BRICS currency, causing shock in the West and concern in the United States. This move is equivalent to a nuclear blow to the dollar. Now, right now, if China gets on board with this as well and starts moving significantly in this direction, and they are part of BRICS, obviously, then the United States is done for. And China and Russia know that. They know that if they want to take out the world reserve currency, the world superpower, all they need to do is shift away from the U.S. dollar, stop doing trade with the United States, and they would crush and destroy the United States and the West, whomever uses the U.S. dollar. And it's a dying currency anyways. The U.S. is in debt. There's been a lot of corruption around it. And so going back to something akin to a gold standard is what they're kind of basing this off of. So this is interesting. Again, you don't need nuclear weapons necessarily. You could destroy the U.S., which, and maybe this is how they do it. Maybe they use a weapon of mass economic destruction, a nuclear weapon in terms of BRICS and this coin, and kind of pushing out the U.S. dollar. And then what would that cause? That would likely cause the United States to escalate the war in Ukraine against Russia, or to drop nuclear weapons on whomever it may be, China, due to Taiwan or some other excuse. But it may actually trigger the U.S. to be the first to drop nuclear weapons in a last gasp effort to save their dying empire. And all empires die. Rome died, and it all goes through it's the Tytler cycle of history. And I think I have a slide of that. I don't know if I can find it quick here. Yeah, I can. There it is, right there. Tytler's cycle of history. So you start out in bondage. You are a slave. Think of the United States in the early days. You're a slave. You come to spiritual faith. You get courage. You start standing up for yourself, and then you start getting free and liberty. You become free. You find freedom, and then from that you get abundance because you're working hard, and then you get selfish as we go around the bottom of the circle. And then as you have lots of wealth and abundance and you're selfish, you get complacent. You don't really care because everything's awesome for you, right? So you don't need to vote in the more conservative leaders. Everything is awesome in the world, and you're going to vote for things that maybe give more money to the poor because that sounds like a good thing to do. And you don't really want to get your hands dirty anyways with helping out the poor. So you get more liberal governments in there who have more handouts and use your tax dollars, and that's good, right? It goes then to apathy and dependence as more and more people then get that government dole, get that free government money. They're just dependent on the government. They didn't make it in the first place, but they're happy to take it. And then they're in bondage. And then everybody becomes in bondage because the government requires more and more tax dollars. And we are all kind of sucked into the circle. So this is the Tytler cycle of history. And we are independence. We are heading into bondage very, very quickly. What happened during the pandemic? There was lockdowns. There was bondage. There was no freedom. But out of, but that's just an example. So this BRICS article is interesting. So pay attention. Now, in terms of World War III, again, the rhetoric is increasing. The chatter is increasing about what could happen. World War III. Fears explode as China warns the United States of imminent storm of lethal consequences over Taiwan. China warned the U.S. that it had crossed a red line after Joe Biden announced more military aid for Taiwan from a fund typically used for sovereign states. Remember, the United States is just provoking this. They want a battle. They want a confrontation. Why? Because they want to distract. They want to distract you from the economic trouble, from the political situation, from Joe Biden's presidency, whatever it may be. This is a distraction. And as long as they don't go to all-out war, everything is awesome. They can keep printing money because now they have the war machine spun up. They don't want it to get out of hand, though. They don't want the trouble to come stateside. No, they want to live fat, dumb, and happy in stateside. And as long as stuff doesn't start happening stateside, then the civilian population won't get upset and won't vote the president out, won't vote the political parties out. But as long as they can keep the battle over in Europe, over in Asia, then everything's awesome for the American leaders. But Russia is saying imminent nuclear war. China is saying imminent nuclear war. Kim Jong-un of North Korea is saying imminent nuclear war. Putin ally, this is Medvedev. He claims the West fails to fully realize the threat of nuclear war. Why? That's because the U.S. doesn't think, and I'm saying the West. I'm not saying it's all the U.S. fault. Canada as well, Australia, these Western countries, UK and France, they realize that if there was a nuclear war, they would be right on the doorstep. They're not interested in this, but right now they're going along with it because U.S. is pushing it in NATO. But yeah, U.S. doesn't really realize the threat because the U.S. kind of thinks they're untouchable in terms of the military leadership, the government. They don't think Russia would bring the war to their doorsteps, or maybe they don't think they can. But you gotta think about the nuclear submarines and the nuclear tsunami submarines. I forget what Poseidon torpedoes that they have, which would cause a devastating tsunami on the East Coast or the West Coast, wherever it may be. Maybe even trigger, the earthquake of a lifetime on the West Coast. So Medvedev, again, saying the West fails to fully realize the threat of nuclear war. They keep saying it. Russia keeps saying nuclear war. It's possible. You keep poking us in the eye. Something's going to happen. Someone's going to make a mistake. What does the West do? They just ignore it. The West totally ignores it, and the West continues to escalate the situation. Again, have you heard in the news that anybody is trying to make peace in Ukraine, Russia? Are they talking about it? No, they're not. It's incredible. Apparently Christian countries, Christian nations, supposedly, they're post-Christian now, but it's a war machine. It's a racket. They make a lot of money from it. And, this Russia-Ukraine war is really an existential threat. This BRICS agreement between the nations is an existential threat to the United States as the world superpower and as the world reserve currency. So, folks, I'm going to leave it there. There is a war coming. Is it going to be a economic war or a war with nuclear weapons? Certainly the Bible, as if you watched yesterday's video, Isaiah 17, Zechariah, Matthew 24, Ezekiel 38, there's all indications there that maybe a nuclear weapon has gone off, or maybe a weapon of mass economic destruction has been deployed, and the world is on its knees and calling for a savior, and that's exactly when the Antichrist will step into power. So we go from this idea of a pandemic, more control, economic collapse, World War III, and then there's even more control with that, and then we had to job losses, and there's more control as more people are dependent on the government. Again, the Tytler cycle of history. More and more people depend on the government for government dole, for food each day. And with that, you have starvation. And because of the famine and starvation, there's uprising, civil unrest. And you know what? The government has to do something about that because they don't want chaos. They're trying to, quote unquote, protect the citizens. So what do? They implement more. They implement more government control. Maybe just like they did in the pandemic. Maybe there's lockdowns. Maybe there's other things happening. And then ultimately, the world will be controlled by an antichrist. There will be a new world order. The world will call out for a savior. They won't accept God, just like Israel didn't accept God as their king, but they wanted King Saul. They wanted a human. The world will only accept a human. They won't accept God, the creator of the universe. And at that time, that Antichrist figure will deploy a mark of the beast system where if you don't accept it, you won't be included in the economy. You won't be able to participate. You won't be able to hold a job. own a house, own a car. You won't be able to do anything. You won't be able to buy food because it will all be based on a digital system at that point in time after everything collapses. But it requires a complete and total collapse of society and famine and World War III effectively for there to be enough pressure on the citizens to accept this. And that's where I think a massive calamity is coming. I think we're going to be here for that. We will see. But with the things spiraling out of control like they are in the world, I think all of us can kind of see this sort of thing coming. Are we near the 7-year period? I think we could very well be. I'm going to keep watching it, and I'll let you know if I change my opinion. But we're hurtling towards something, folks. Next year is the great solar eclipse. So that should be interesting to watch. What happens to that? Is there any significance to it? We'll see. We know that in Revelation chapter 6, the sun and the moon go dark. Is that part of that process? But that then does, the sun and the moon going dark at that instance, I believe is supernatural, and that then ushers in the wrath of God at the what I believe is the midpoint of the 7-year period. So I don't think the solar eclipse next year is the midpoint or the start of the wrath, but I think it's a forewarning of what God has in store, what is written in His Word about future events. So I'll leave there, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.